March 15th, 2022, already to order. And begin the meeting in traditional fashion with a Pledge of Allegiance. Join me however you can or would like to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Appreciate that. City Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Humby.
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Schmeckel.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
That's 9 present and 0 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. All City Council members are present. It's 6:31 p.m., Council members, and the sun is still in the sky. Low, but still in the sky, and the light is out, and it's coming in from my window. And I've mostly adjusted to the time change. But let's see if we have public comment on non-agenda items from attendees with us tonight. Doesn't appear to be the case, so we'll close the public comment period and move to agenda item number 5, Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I move that the following 2 changes be approved. We are adding to item number 21 an executive session regarding litigation 14-4-405, lowercase a, Roman numeral 3, and land negotiations. Wyoming statute 16-4-405A, Roman numeral 7. Our second change this evening is on consent agenda item 9EB. Instead of a work session, cross that out. We will be having a special meeting that evening. Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you. I move that the agenda be set as changed.
Second.
Motion and a second for Councilmember Schuster. All those in favor, same sign.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Brings us now to item 6. We have a couple of items under the item number 6 heading this evening. First up, we have a proclamation, and we're going to have our fellow Councilmember Cumby, read that proclamation. I understand that we have our interim director of human resources, Director Andrews, here to receive it, and we appreciate both of them very much. Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Proclamation. Whereas disability in no way diminishes the right of individuals to live independently, enjoy self-determination, make choices, contribute to society, and experience the economic, political, social, cultural, and educational mainstream of American society. Whereas family members, friends, and members of the community can play a vital role in enhancing the lives of people with disabilities, especially when the family and community are provided with necessary support services, and public and private employers are aware of the capabilities of people with disabilities to be engaged in competitive work in inclusive settings, whereas the goals of this city include providing individuals with disabilities the opportunities and support to make informed choices and decisions, live in homes and communities where they can exercise their full rights and responsibilities as citizens, pursue meaningful and productive lives, contribute to their family, community, state, and nation, have independent friendships and relationships with others, and achieve full inclusion in society, whereas thousands in Wyoming face challenges with disabilities daily, whereas the month of March has been designated as Disability Awareness Month to celebrate and recognize disabled individuals and to promote awareness. Now, therefore, on behalf of Mayor Paul Weaver, President of the governing body of the City of Laramie, Wyoming, do hereby proclaim March 2022 as Laramie Disabilities Awareness Month, and encourage all citizens, businesses, public and private agencies, religious and educational institutions to join in observing the month in honor of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Cumby. And as I said, I believe we have our Interim Director of HR here.
Mayor, I apologize, but it doesn't appear that she was able to join us tonight. So this is a proclamation that the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities has requested for a couple years in a row to recognize those individuals that have disabilities, but then also to recognize the businesses around town that make those great efforts to support our community and make it accessible to everyone. So just a thank you to all of those in the community that continue to serve our entire community.
And to thank you, City Clerk, for filling in and making those statements. Very much, and spot on. Councilmember Cumby?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in addition, I would like to acknowledge the work of the Advisory Council on Disabilities toward public education and awareness, toward creating participatory activities such as the mobility obstacle course, for their consideration of sidewalk access to individuals in our community who might be mobility impaired, and those of us who are not, to initiate closed captioning for meetings, and for their participation in Pride Fest, and hopefully the upcoming Freedom Has a Birthday. And I would like to acknowledge our two new members, Gabriella or Gabby Sala and Brandon Newman. So thank you very much. And this committee is a very hard-working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. Yes, and I think we have a number of agencies, some of whom we heard from just last week, that are focused very much on the successes and challenges that are held by the members of our community living with disabilities. And there's certainly a population that is an important, meaningful, and active part of our community, as you just outlined. So it's very much appropriate for us to read that proclamation, and thank you both and the City Clerk for making a few comments about that. And of course, to those folks that volunteered their time, both staff and members of the public with our Disabilities Commission. We'll look forward to some more events along the lines of those that Councilor Cumby mentioned in the near future. All right, we now have a public hearing, and I'm going to ask the City Clerk to read the notice for the public hearing.
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom meeting for the following purpose. Original Ordinance number 2042, amending the Laramie Municipal Code, Chapter 2.04, to adjust ward boundaries to have nearly equal proportions after the 2020 census. All information relative to this matter is available for review at the City of Laramie City Clerk's office at 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present or may be represented by his or her agent at the meeting.
Thank you, City Clerk. We'll open the public hearing for comments. If you're on the Zoom call, you just indicate that you'd like to raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to speak during the public hearing. This item will be before us on the regular agenda this evening as well, which will present another opportunity for public comment. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you, City Clerk, and we'll move on now to announcements. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple announcements this evening. We are getting ready for Laramie Community Cleanup Days. Those will be held the first 2 weeks of May, from May 1 through 15. For folks that are interested in participating this year, they can call 721-5285 to coordinate a cleanup time and location. And just so the public know, while we welcome cleanup anywhere in the community, we have identified some priority areas this year. Those are listed on our website. There are about 7 of them. So again, if folks are interested in participating in community cleanup days in May, we are starting to register people. Again, the number to call 721-5285, and of course there's more information on our website also. And then one other note with respect to spring cleanup, the City of Laramie landfill voucher event, that's going to begin soon as well. We'll have landfill vouchers ready to be issued through our online process here in the early part of May. So folks can get more information and learn more about that program on the website also. Thank you.
City Manager, it seems worth mentioning at this moment that if people are looking to utilize the landfill vouchers during that day, we'd also encourage them to bring out all that glass that they've been stocking up for recycling and participate in the new glass recycling program when they go out there with everything else. Just a little tidbit I wanted to toss in there. I know that people are familiar with that, but it's still somewhat new. So bring your glass out when you go to utilize your vouchers. City Manager, other announcements?
No other announcements, but we are eager to recognize our Employee of the Month whenever you're ready.
Thank you, City Manager. It's all over to you.
Okay, great. We're really happy to welcome Caleb Duff to our call this evening, and to tell you how on the spot Caleb is. We apparently didn't provide notice to him until about a half hour ago, and he's been able to get on the call, so we're so thrilled to have him here. And Caleb, we apologize for not making you aware of this primetime event a little bit sooner. Council, Caleb is an employee out at the City of Laramie landfill. He was nominated to be our Rock Star of the Month by landfill supervisor Mitch Eckert, who said that he routinely goes above and beyond and is always one of the most dependable folks out there. Caleb tells us that while he didn't always envision working with the city or having a career here, he did decide to apply. He's been with us for a number of years now and is rapidly becoming a really important part of our solid waste crew and operations. Right now, he is an equipment operator. What he does every day is process material coming into the landfill, removing all that unacceptable material, keeping the trash exposure to a minimum, and trying to keep the landfill looking as natural as possible. Caleb says he really likes the 2 busiest days of the week, which are Tuesday and Thursday, when the landfill gets its greatest volume of material. Caleb says he's found a passion for and a career with the city. He's originally from California, came here to attend LCCC, and fortunately for us has decided to make a career and a home here at the City of Laramie. Caleb and his new fiance enjoy a lot of camping, fly fishing, and outdoor activities with their 2 dogs, and we're just thrilled to have him here. My favorite thing that I learned about Caleb as learning more about him through the Employee of the Month is that his work ethic, he says, reflects something that his father told him, which was be the first one there and the last one back. So we sure appreciate his spirit and his energy, and we're so glad to have him as part of our solid waste crew.
Thank you, City Manager. And Mr. Duff, thanks for joining us with such speed on short notice. And you know, we don't do that to put you on the spot. It's nice for us to meet folks when they're recognized this way from the rest of the city. So that's why we like to have people join us when they can. So we really do appreciate that. And if you'd like to say something, now's your chance. And again, not to put you on the spot, and we don't expect you to have a big speech about your experiences in Laramie or working or anything. But if you want to say anything, go right ahead.
Well, thank you for having me here, and I really appreciate what you guys do. And just want to say that, I wouldn't be able to do any of what I do without the guys that I work with out there. And, I appreciate Mitch and Wayne, JR, all those guys. So
That's noted, and thanks. And I think that says a lot about how you'd want to notice, give a little bit of notice to your coworkers out there too. We really appreciate you guys. You guys are sometimes kind of a little bit of the unsung heroes and super important to the operations of the city of Laramie. In fact, nothing would be happening without you guys. So guys and gals out there. So we really appreciate it. And we appreciate this opportunity just to give you a little thumbs up for everything you're doing out there. Thank you very much. And again, for being here on the spot like that so quick. Thanks again.
yeah,
right.
Thank you.
You bet. Take care, and thanks for working for Laramie. So council members, that was great. We always like to have that at the top of the meeting, and thank you, City Manager, for giving us a little bit of background about Mr. Duff. So we're at item number 7 now, City Council, and this is the spot on the agenda where if there are any disclosures by any of the members about anything coming forward to the council tonight on the agenda, you have an opportunity to make a disclosure. Are there any? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. And that takes us to item number 8, which is Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I move that the consent agenda be approved and that each specific action on the consent agenda be approved as indicated.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilmember Harrington. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on the consent agenda?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville. Somerville appears to, we have lost our connection for right now. So absent, Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses, 0 nos, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
That motion carries. The consent agenda has been approved. That takes us to item number 10, the beginning of the regular agenda items that weren't covered under consent. Council members, as if there's anything the mayor could do to further shatter your faith in his ability to run the meetings, I've accidentally deleted the document that had the folks that were going to introduce items. So item number 11, Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to award the bid for the 3rd Street Utility Rehabilitation Phase 2 project to Ofdal Construction Incorporated of Casper, Wyoming, in the amount of $5,836,285, along with a contingency of $583,628, for a total amount not to exceed $6,419,913, and amend the fiscal year 2022 water fund budget accordingly, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
All right, that's motion from Councilmember Harrington, seconded by Councilmember O'Doherty, and I see that we've got Mr. Webb from Public Works for the background. Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. Phase 1 of this project was actually completed in 2020. It included the installation of multiple valves along 3rd Street. Those valves allow our utility workers to better isolate the water system in case of water breaks in the area. This project we're talking about tonight is Phase 2, and will replace approximately 8,300 linear feet of old pipe valves, fittings, and fire hydrants. The main section for replacement is in 3rd Street between Sheridan and Gibbon. That whole section will be replaced. The utility division also identified 2 additional intersections within 3rd Street that have had multiple breaks in the past couple of years. So we'll be replacing those, and they include the intersection of 3rd and Baker, as well as 3rd and Fetterman. The driving force behind this project is the fact that YDOT will be performing major work on the roadway in 2025. So we really need to get this old line replaced before the new asphalt goes down. On February 8th, 2 bids were received for the project. After review of the bid documents, staff is recommending that the low bidder, Off the Blow Construction, be awarded the Phase 2 construction contract for the 3rd Street Utility Rehabilitation Project. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Any questions for Mr. Webb? Mr. Webb, I will make a note, at least, of this item. The city manager has reminded the council a couple of times this year that when we get into this summer and as the weather starts to warm up and we're doing more of this work, we're going to be looking forward to a lot of that here in the community. There's a lot of things going on, and we need to get them done now for a number of reasons, one of which you just noted, which is that YDOT's got some major work coming. So this is going to be part of that. Will this be one of the earlier projects on the calendar in your estimation as we move into that season?
Yeah, Mayor, I would assume so. This project is pretty big, so it's going to take all of the construction season that they can handle. Once we get awarded, we will work with the contractor to get their submittals, which will include schedule. But I would anticipate this project taking all of the summer into the fall.
Appreciate that. I think that's probably worth talking about a little bit tonight at the meeting as we start seeing some of these projects come in. City Manager, I hope I sort of illustrated that correctly. I know it's something we've talked about a bit with frequency, that we're looking forward to a lot of that. We've met with folks at the University of Wyoming. We'll also have a number of things going on to try to come up with some ideas about how we as a city can manage these projects in the most efficient way possible, and also to the extent that we can prep the community for the fact that there's going to be a lot of that going on. I think that has come to be expected with the summer season, both for the city and other government agencies, including the state. When it's warm weather, there's always a lot of work to catch up on with infrastructure, and this summer will be no different, but perhaps a little bit on the heavier side. And it may take some time, as Mr. Webb just noted. And I think that's worth talking about just briefly. Any other questions for Mr. Webb while he's here? He's here for another couple items as well. But that's my dog barking in the background. He's excited about the construction. All right. Let's see if there's any public comment on this item. I'd like to recognize Mr. Cisneros and have him come in and be allowed to make some comments. Welcome. Go ahead whenever you're ready. You're on the phone, Mr. Cisneros. I think it's, the city clerk will correct me, but I think it's *6. *6, okay.
Can you folks hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. So I just wanted to make one comment about the street work that's going to happen here. I really think you guys need to put a clause and get these contractors to follow through with items. I've been watching some of the work that happened in the previous years here, to be specifically on Baker Street, right in front of my property for my business. There was work done there a year ago, and we have a sinkhole in the middle of the project there that is approximately probably 2 inches low. If you were to take a laser level out there and take a look at that, it holds water and ice and snow and rain. And part of the problem is that the city doesn't have a tremendous amount of money to continue to do these projects, and these contractors should follow back through and make sure that these things are being compacted correctly And if there is an issue, especially in a short period of time, they need to be able to come back and resolve these issues so the city isn't having to spend their dollars to repair these things years after. And so it's a big concern for me for all the citizens, the tax dollars that everybody has to spend going towards these types of projects.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. Thanks for making some time to be here to speak on that.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Still open for public comments on this item from members of the public. All right, we'll close public comment for now. Council, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we vote? All right. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes,
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
that motion carries. Thank you very much. Next is item number 12, and that's Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Amendment Number 1 to the Professional Services Agreement with WWC Engineering for construction services on the 3rd Street Utility Rehabilitation Phase 2 project in the amount of $102,000 for a total contract amount not to exceed $480,000, and amend the fiscal year 2022 water fund budget accordingly and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
So close, you guys. Councilmember Schuster seconds the motion by Councilmember Schmeckel. The Vice Mayor will get another chance, I'm positive. Mr. Webb, it's over to you.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, so WWC Engineering is the company that designed the project for 3rd Street that you just awarded. This amendment to their professional services contract will allow them to do on-site inspection, construction management, construction administration during the project.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember O'Doherty?
It sounds like this helps address the problem that Mr. Cisneros just mentioned, if the construction manager is looking for those things.
Yeah, thank you for raising that point, Councilmember O'Doherty. Mr. Webb, is that your feeling and assessment as well?
Mayor, Council, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a part of their job, and they'll do compaction testing and things like that to ensure that there's no sinkholes or anything like that in the future.
Appreciate it, Mr. Webb. And the gentleman's point that he made during the public comment is well taken, of course. Is absolutely correct that the city can't go back and have to redo projects over and over again. So that's reassuring to hear that we've got some work being done on that end. Make sure that we're not faced with that situation. Other questions or comments for this public works item? All right, let's see if there's any public comment on it. Folks a minute to raise a hand if they want. Members of the public should know that these contracts and agreements are available for them to examine and look through on the City Council's agenda webpage. You open up the agenda and you can click on the links if you want to look on at the actual contract, look at things like performance agreements and dates. That information is available to you. Seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment on this item. City Council, I'll give you another chance for comments or questions before we vote. Yes, Councilmember Schuster.
When you talk about this, one of the things that I hope somebody remembers, I realize somebody told me that I'm the longest sitting council person on here, but the 3rd Street, when it goes near the food bank, when it goes near Dairy Queen and there's a natural underground river there. And we have had a tremendous problem with 3rd Street there, where an engineering company came in and had to put a I don't want to call it a foam, but a material underneath to hold 3rd Street up when it crosses about a half block area because of an underground river. So I hope, just like they talked about that sinkhole, there used to be a really, really big problem on North 3rd. And they've corrected it. Now I hope we don't plow it all up and turn it into something again. Excuse me.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Yeah, and of course, 3rd Street, as we know, and as was referenced by Mr. Webb earlier, is of course part of the state highway system as well. And we struggle in different parts of Wyoming and certainly in Laramie with some weird aspects of geography and geology with some of these things, and we just do our best with it. But I appreciate the history, Councilmember Schuster, I do. And yes, you are the longest serving member of council for this council. We've always got a few veterans, and I think it's a good thing. All right. If there aren't any other comments, I guess City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes,
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
that motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk. We're going to go to item number 13. I'm going to call on Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to award the bid for Cedar Street Reconstruction Project to Big Hunks Excavation Incorporated, Laramie, Wyoming, in the amount of $1,438,537.27, along with contingency of $143,853.73 for a total amount not to exceed $1,582,391, and amend the fiscal year 2022 SPT budget accordingly, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
This motion by Councilmember Somerville, second Councilmember Harrington. And Mr. Webb.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, the Cedar Street reconstruction is an SPT project. It will reconstruct Cedar Street from Clark to Harney. When we do that, there'll also be some repairs on curb, gutter, sidewalk, ADA upgrades. We received bids on February 15th for the job. We received 3 bids, and after review of the bid documents, staff is recommending the low bidder, which was Big Hunks Excavation, for the project. Any questions? I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Questions? That's another section of street, Mr. Webb, that we've had some challenges with in the past, is it not?
Mayor, yes, it is. This one we've been planning for a couple of years now. We receive a lot of complaints on this street. It is in very poor condition. The PCI index on it is 38, and the base soil layer under there is poor. So this is a full reconstruction. We'll be tearing the whole thing out, putting in new base and geotextile fabric underneath to help support the road.
Appreciate that extra little bit of detail, and council, those are those kinds of things I think we want to just highlight for a minute when we're talking about these items before we approve them. Any other questions for Mr. Webb before we go to public comment? All right. Let's see if we have any public comment on this item. Seeing none, close the public comment. Check with council one more time. City Clerk, may have a roll call vote.
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. That motion carries. That brings us to item 14. And before I recognize Councilmember Harrington, I also want to thank him for providing me with the list of council members and the order of items to introduce. He's bailed me out. Councilmember Harrington, item number 14.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and happy to help. I move to approve amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement with Sunrise Engineering for construction services on the Cedar Street reconstruction project in an amount of $107,300 and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
It's a second from Councilmember Schuster. Motion by Councilmember Harrington. Mr. Webb, tell us about it.
Honorable Mayor, City Council. So Sunrise Engineering was the firm that designed the Cedar Street reconstruction project. And now that it's been awarded, this amendment will give them the ability to do the construction administration and inspection during the project.
Thank you. Council members, the questions about this? Again, hopefully this is a major working with these folks to make sure this work is done efficiently, on time, and in a way that's going to be durable. Let's see if there's any public comment on the item. Seeing none, we'll close public comment on the item. Go back to the council for a moment. City Clerk, may I have a roll call vote?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmickel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. So that motion carries and takes us now to item number 15 on our list, which is Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you very much. The title is the Award of Professional Services Agreement for Design of the Street Storm Reconstruction Venture Drive Project. I move to award the Professional Services Agreement for the design of the Street Storm Reconstruction Venture Drive Project to Tri-Hydro Corporation of Laramie, Wyoming, in the amount of $157,552 plus a contingency of $15,755 for a total amount not to exceed $173,307, and amend the fiscal year 2022 budget accordingly to authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
And a second for Vice Mayor Pierce. Motion by Councilmember Schuster. Mr. Webb.
Honorable Mayor, City Council. So this project will design the Venture Drive project. The design and construction will include evaluating and implementing storm drainage concerns along Venture Drive from Adams, Westerly to Wyotek's property. We'll also upgrade the roadway to include curb, gutter, and sidewalk with a multi-use pathway, which doesn't exist right now. The driving force behind this one is a delayed improvement agreement established with Laramie Chamber of Business Alliance. Staff went out for a request for qualifications, and we received proposals on February 4th. We received 7 proposals from companies, from engineering firms. A review committee of 5 staff members reviewed those proposals, met and discussed those proposals, and they recommend Tri-Hydro Corporation be awarded the design of the Venture Street reconstruction project.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Webb? Mr. Webb, that Venture Drive area is actually one of the newer roadways in Laramie. How long ago was it that the original drainage system was put in place?
Honorable Mayor, I'm going to ask if Eric Japp knows that question. He's our city engineer, is on the line. I do not know, but Eric may.
Okay.
I'll bet you Councilor Schuster does too.
Sure, and I'm going to call on him too. Go ahead, City Engineer Japp.
Your honorable mayor, members of council. I don't know exactly when the drainage was put in out there. My guess is a lot of the roadway was kind of paved when Wyotech was being moving in out there, and then the drainage probably was shortly after when the developments were going in along Venture Drive on the other side of the road. Would be my guess.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Can you fill in some of that for us?
Yes, thank you. The building out there was built in 2000. So it's basically been 22 years since the original Venture Drive was built. But the top portion, which they talked about, which goes by our dorms and our main building, already has curb, gutter, and sidewalk on one side. And it has curb and gutter on the other side, but it's undeveloped and there's 77 acres over there. So past Wyotech built a second smaller building. And that one has ribbon paving with, I'm going to use the word ditches, that probably isn't politically correct. Probably water retention cells is something better. But the water table in that section of town during the wet season of Laramie, like right now, is only 36 inches in the ground. So this is going to be one extremely hard challenge, because even when we talked to some of the engineers, they said, wow, we ought to maybe widen the street a little bit, but the water retention ditches do a really good job of allowing ground soakage. And basically most of the companies there that are there, there's a couple of open areas still, are mowing the ditches and actually have regular grass in them. So they actually do quite well. So I'm very, very curious to see what we're going to do there with the water table level out there. So I am very happy to see that a bike path is going to come to fruition out there. We have a lot of people that walk their dogs and pets out there, and a lot of bicyclers. And those little Bluebird scooters are everywhere. So trying to get maybe them on the bike trails and off the street might be really nice, because those are allowed on the bike trails, except for the ones along the river. Thank you. Hope that's enough.
Thank you. No, thank you, Councilmember Schuster. That's a little bit of the extra that I was looking for out there in that area. I had no idea it was that. It was 20 years since. Time flies, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Other council questions? Okay, let's see if there's public comment. Seeing no public comment, go back. And yes, Councilmember Schmeckel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just reading the briefing document here, and I see it says it starts at Adams Street and moves westerly towards Wyotech. Do we have any idea where this might go? Is it going to stop in the middle of Venture Drive, or is it going to go all the way to Colorado past Wyotech?
We'll give Mr. Webb a crack, and I'll go to Councilmember Schuster.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, City Council, it goes westerly to approximately Wyotech's property line, where, as Councilor Schuster was saying, the existing curb and gutter is. So it will tie into the existing curb and gutter that's there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Webb. Councilor Schuster, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I just wanted to let you know that 2/3 of Venture Drive is and I believe it's a collector, because it's quite wide. So it has curb and gutter on 2/3 of Venture Drive. And then the last third that goes towards the new Game and Fish building, the blood bank, and, I don't want to mispronounce their name. Yeah, all of those do not have curb and gutter in front of them. So it will complete the street from Wyotech down. And hopefully just as wide as it is now, because it is a nice sized collector street. And with the 77 acres being purchased across the street and having future plans for it, I'm glad to see that the complete street will be done.
Thank you. All right. If there isn't any other further comment on the item, I believe I've already gone to public comment. We'll go to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Beaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
That motion carries. And thanks, Mr. Webb, for being here for the background on some infrastructure items, quite a few of those, some of them long awaited, and we appreciate it. And some of them special purpose tax funded, as you mentioned. So that's good information for us. A lot of infrastructure on the way and some long needed improvements happening. Councilmember Gabriel, I've had a request for you to introduce item number 16, if you would, please.
I was just getting ready to call it up here. Give me a second. I just noticed a message from Aaron.
Yeah. Council members and Councilmember O'Doherty, I hope you don't mind. Councilmember O'Doherty is just having a little bit of a sore throat and wants to preserve her what voice she has. So we're going to let her. We'll give Councilmember Gabriel a minute. I'll just talk again about several projects in the west side and in West Laramie, important infrastructure projects on the way, and contracts approved this evening. Councilmember Schuster, I'll call on you quickly. Yes, please.
Well, thank you. A lot of that is part of the city, but a lot of these improvements on Venture that we just had, I wanted to let you know that Game and Fish, when they built there, we did not make them wide the street, put curb and gutter and sidewalk on that side. So there were several businesses that put money in the bank for this particular project to happen. So yes, I'm sure the city is funding some of it, but the majority of it will be on the businesses that are on that street and had to, in lieu of doing it at the time, put an amount in a bank account that then will be used at this time to make these improvements on Venture.
An example of the famous delayed improvement agreement situation. Perfect. And we like to see those kinds of partnerships. That's good. That's good. Appreciate that information too, Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Gabriel, are you ready to introduce item number 16 for us?
You bet.
Thank you.
I move to approve original ordinance number 2042 on second reading, amending Laramie Municipal Code Chapter 2.4 to adjust ward boundaries to have nearly equal proportion after the 2020 census.
Second.
Second by Councilmember O'Doherty. Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel, for introducing that on short notice. And we all understand. All right. City Clerk, did you want to give an introduction, a little bit of background on this item to get us started?
Sure, Mayor, I'd love to. Mayor and Council, this is the second reading of original ordinance number 2042. As you all know, this has been a project that the City Council have been working really hard on. The legislature has wrapped up their session. We've kind of been doing this in conjunction with them, although this is kind of separate as well from the redistricting, but that has passed, leaving the city whole. But not to veer off our subject of tonight. Tonight we're addressing our ward boundaries. After the 2020 census count, it became clear that our ward boundaries were out of balance proportionally. So to meet state statute, we needed to rebalance those ward boundaries. So with the council's help and working closely with the elections team and the Albany County Clerk, we've had a few drafts come before the council. The reading tonight is on 2.04, or the map 2.1, sorry, that was proposed previously. With that, Mayor, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. The Albany County Clerk did send over 2 members of the elections team, Jory and Karen Bowman. And Jory, I apologize, but I don't know how to say your last name. City Clerk, do you think? I think this would probably be a good time to
go to our guests to maybe contribute for some background on this item before we get into council discussion. Council, does that seem like the appropriate move? And I'll take a stab at it. Mr. Unverzagt?
Thanks, Mayor. That's pretty close. It's Unverzagt. You guys have all done very good with it. You're not the first person, but yeah. I talked with County Clerk Gonzalez today, and Karen and I are here just to answer any questions that you guys have directed towards us with 2.1 or the other proposals.
We appreciate it very much, and your regular attendance at these meetings where we've talked about this. It's very helpful for us, and we thank you for being here. Councilmember, yes, thank you. Councilmember Schuster, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I was talking with the same manager before the meeting, and the proposal has left, yes, and has went to the governor. As of yesterday, the governor was yet to sign it. So I just wondered, as of today, is it signed in yet?
I had read an article to that effect too, Councilmember Schuster. Does anybody know? Maybe Councilmember Gabriel?
I read on WildFile today that it's pending a review by the Attorney General's office. That was an article in WildFile today, so the governor's held up on signing the 6231 bill.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Councilmember Schuster.
And I will tell you why it's held up on signing. It's not Laramie for once. Sheridan is opposing it because what the Senate came up with, or their governing body, was 2 areas that are not within the 5% boundary. So they're slightly over 5%. I don't know if they figure the growth will even it out or not, but they are not within the 5%.
Thank you. I think this is important information, and I think it's germane to our discussion and our decision, but I would like to also to recognize the same thing that the city clerk reminded us of just a few minutes ago. And this isn't directed towards anybody because I think all those comments were appropriate. But regardless of what they do at the state legislature and the outcome of those decisions, we have to move forward with our own ward boundaries. And it's unfortunate that we're in such a contentious year with the legislative districts. Not so much for us as a city council, except that we're part of other electoral systems and part of other elections that our city clerk's office and the folks that they work with, and the county clerk's office particularly, and the folks that they work with, have to figure out how to run these elections. And it looks like it's going to be down to the wire for figuring all these things out in terms of precincts and voting locations. And that's unfortunate. Nevertheless, we've got to get some boundaries adopted. And if we have ours ready to go before the rest of them, then I guess that's a credit to our ability to get some things done. I understand that other communities are holding off until they know what they're going to look at before they get their ward boundaries in place. Comments about this? Discussion? Questions? Councilmember O'Doherty?
The map presented by the clerk, I know that a lot of the reason for trying to draw boundaries, east-west boundaries on the western 2/3 of town was to try to get income, socioeconomic groups in all the wards. And I'm looking at a map from the Census Bureau, and we have that with the map presented by the clerk. We have some of the lowest income parts of town and in with the highest in all of these configurations. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions about Councilmember Harrington?
Thanks, Mayor. Last week, a councilor made a comment about the west of the tracks, basically, and that really that gave me some I guess need for introspection and caused me to go a little deeper on these maps. And you know, in that process, I think I've told many of you on phone calls or whatever, that I didn't really have a dog in this fight, that I thought all of these maps were pretty reasonable. I have, the more time I spend with them, I think I disagree with that a little bit more. And I guess, you know, I don't mean to be sort of like sharp elbowed on any of this, but I think to the counselor's point last week, one of the things that I was thinking about, and we were talking about map 1B in that regard, which is the one that divides West Laramie in half. And I thought that might be yeah, sorry. You're right, Mayor. It is not in half. It divides West Laramie along Snowy Range Road to the north and the south. And, you know, one of the things I wanted to, that I was mulling over was ensuring that my vote wouldn't push folks living out in West Laramie further from having a viable say in who represents them. And the part about trying to not be too sharp-elbowed here is I don't think that's any of your intention, just to be very clear about that. And I think quite the opposite is true. But I am concerned that splitting West Laramie and the west side in half, it looks a whole lot like cracking to me in sort of the gerrymander sense. And I again, don't mean to imply that any of you are intending to gerrymander, because I think higher of you than that. But what we'll do is split West Laramie into smaller groups of people who have less say in who their council representatives are. And I can see the point of having 6 representatives representing West Laramie, 6 people who have to talk about paving roads and things like that. But I also think on the other end of that, you have 6 council members that no longer have, that can have the votes required to get a council seat without talking about those things. And that's what's giving me pause, Mayor. And again, I'm trying to be really cautious not to put anything, I think highly of all of you, and I do think your intentions are the same as mine. I think largely we want fair elections, and we want, you know, fair districts and wards in this regard. So I just don't know if map 1B gets us there. I think it might push us further from that. So Mr. Mayor, I don't know if I'm favorable to that map. That sort of kicks me to trying to decide between the other 2 maps, which one is my favorite. But for, you know, the sake of getting out of the way, I'm going to quit talking now and just listen for a little bit.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. It's always refreshing to hear people talk about how they've reevaluated views over time. Nothing wrong with that. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor, and I do appreciate the discussion because I think it's important. I think one of my concerns in viewing map 2.1, that one gets very messy around the university, which is why I do not favor that map. So I'll just leave that one there. So for me, the options are really 1B or option number 3. I guess that's what we're calling it now. To the point about West Laramie having a say, to be quite honest, there's not enough population in West Laramie, at least voting population, to actually move an election on either of these maps. And so I do appreciate what the council member is saying, that we don't want to take away, any particular piece of the city's ability to have their voices heard with these maps. I don't think either 1B or 3 really matters. There's just not enough people in West Laramie. The tree area population overrides that, being included in both these in terms of people that actually show up and vote and having their voices heard. My intention with supporting the 1B map is really to try to get rid of the idea that there is west of the tracks, that everything is part of the city and needs to be included as part of the city. And certainly the ward map that we have now does not help that. I don't think that number 3 makes it worse than it is right now. to be absolutely fair to that. I think that stays the same. But I think 1B gives us a chance to really get 6 council members that have to recognize West Laramie as part of the city and have to hear their complaints and their wants and their needs. And it's not to say, and I want to be clear, last week I was not even remotely trying to say that the council, especially this one, has not represented West Laramie. But there have been times in the past where that absolutely feels true. There's no need to deal with the area of the city that has literally the biggest infrastructure needs of the entire city, because there's only 3 council members, and we can't do anything without convincing the rest of the council members that it's a good idea. In comparison to the other wards, which seem to flow more freely, right? That's just been my personal experience. So my intention with supporting 1B is to really, at the end of the day, knock down the idea that there's a west section of the city. I don't think that it harms that vote in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment at the appropriate time, but I don't want to cut off discussion prematurely.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And we'll keep it in mind that you've got an amendment pending. I'd like to see if anybody else would like to speak to this for the initial time. And I suppose I would for my first time, then I'll go to Councilmember Harrington. This is a good conversation. And it's a conversation that has a lot of strong points to it, and I'll just quickly try to run through some of the points I think I've tried to make over the course of this process. I really get frustrated when we keep talking about West Laramie in a context of separating it out from the rest of the community, and I don't think we even mean to do that. It's just something we've gotten accustomed to. That West Laramie is in and of itself this particular area that we can't integrate into the rest of the city because it's west of the tracks, west of the river. Some of the streets aren't paved. Some of the streets have never been paved. A lot of them won't. And I just have to share with you folks that frustrates me. I grew up in West Laramie. I used to walk in the muddy streets to Linford School before the paving was done a few years ago. Lived there for many, many years. Lived there in recent memory as a member of the council and represented that area. And I know I've shared this viewpoint with you before, but I can tell you there is not a singular attitude about how things need to go out there amongst the city residents that live in West Laramie. There's not a singular attitude about how they should be represented or the direction of that neighborhood. For West Laramie, I think we've heard over the years some different voices from parts of the community on these proposed maps, but the big population chunk out in West Laramie, I would go so far as to say doesn't appreciate being singled out as a particular neighborhood with a particular type of character or population, nor do they look at themselves that way. And I would say that as I've been paying attention to the city council and the decisions made closely over the last 12 years, I must say I've never seen the council have any issue supporting infrastructure spending. I'd note that tonight we just went through a number of important infrastructure projects and all voted for them unanimously. We've advocated for special purpose tax projects out there for that neighborhood, and we have listened to constituents out there. I think one of the things that we wrestle with is the history of the annexation of West Laramie and the old system of electing all of our city council members at large. And that's a situation of the past. That isn't what we deal with today. I think what we deal with today is a desire on the part of residents out there to be fully integrated into Laramie in a way that doesn't create this boundary and say, well, that's West Laramie. Yeah, it's an individual neighborhood, sure. So is the tree area, so is the south side of town, but we don't put that same baggage on those neighborhoods that we tend to put on West Laramie. And in doing so, we create this idea that if they don't have a certain number of people that are dedicated to only focusing on the interests of their neighborhood, they're going to be somehow at a loss. Well, we can't provide that, as the council member before me just alluded to. That's not the way our ward systems and boundaries work, nor are they going to work that way. So I would urge the council to resist this idea that this neighborhood needs any more special consideration than any other, with the exception that it's farther behind on infrastructure because it's a neighborhood that was brought into the rest of the city proper at a much later date than the rest of the community. And that's not the fault of any resident or any council up until that time. It's a historical artifact. So I'd urge the council to resist that singling out. Not that it's even done with ill intention. It's just something that we've gotten used to. It's a pattern in our conversations. And I thank you for your patience. I hope I haven't talked over 3 minutes. And if I have, I apologize. I'd like to recognize the Vice Mayor, and then I'll go to Councilmember Harrington for a second time.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've only heard from one person regarding the ward maps until today, and I heard from a second person today. So we've talked about this subject numerous times, and I've only had two people. One person sent me an email and one person called. So I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed. And we had nobody for public comment during the public hearing tonight. So maybe between now and next week, when we actually have to make our final decision, we will have heard from members of our community. The second thing I'd like to discuss is basically in line with what our mayor was saying. When I look at map 1B, I've called it all along the north and the south and the east map, because that's basically how the community would be divided. You know, we have a northern area, a southern area, and then an eastern area. And I think maybe subconsciously, I was perhaps thinking we also need to get away from always mentioning west or west of the tracks, or however we did that. I didn't really think about it until the mayor mentioned that. And in my discussions with other council members and the one person this afternoon, I refer to it as the north, south, and east map. And I think that is very telling. So again, I spoke last week, and I have to tell you, I'm in very strong support of 1B, the north, south, and east map. And I'll just leave it at that. So thanks.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'd like to call on Councilmember Harrington for a second time. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Schuster put his hand up previously if he'd like to speak. It was up and down quick.
Finding your spot. They've recognized you. Go for it.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Go ahead, Councilmember Harrington. It's okay. Just trying to follow the first second rule as much as I can, but go right ahead.
I sure appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. Because of the comments of the last three speakers, I just want to be clear. My comments were not a value statement on whether West Laramie should or should not be included or split or referred to as something separate or whatever. Mine were in response directly to the comments last week, indicating that we only have one council member west of the tracks and how important it was to have more council members west of the tracks. So I would just say, Mr. Mayor, that wasn't my point. My point was, if we're talking about communities of interest here, and while maybe there is a large discrepancy and certainly individual votes that happen in West Laramie that are not a monolith, I do think you would largely see that both the West Side and West Laramie are likely to agree on some sort of neighborhood specific things, in the same way that you may expect like the northeastern part of Laramie to have some neighborhood specific things that they would like to vote on as a group. So I'm not saying that everybody in West Laramie is a whatever. I'm just saying that they may all think paved roads are a good idea. And you know, not all of them, you know as well as anybody, Mayor, they don't all agree with that either in West Laramie. I would also point out, just to the earlier point, that the city does currently spend, I think city manager could correct me, but 60% of our infrastructure budget is in Ward 1 as the line is drawn now. And I think that 60% may be in West Laramie. So West Laramie is not being forgotten, just as a, point of clarification to an earlier point. And then, Mr. Mayor, I think while I share that hope, that West Laramie would just be Laramie, some things are hard to change, right? And we can hope for those, but having, a railroad that is impassable by, except for 2 points, and a river and an interstate does make a pretty defined line. But I would note that 1B also splits the west side in half. And I think that is a neighborhood that we've seen organize and engage together. And this census block divides it in a place that is kind of strange, because the census block is drawn on Clark Street. I'm zooming in on the map trying to see if it's Clark Street, but that's the census block from when Clark Street was kind of a sensible place to split the neighborhood. I don't think that makes sense now. So, Mr. Mayor, I hear that there is some support for 1B. I don't intend to support 1B. But I hope that is enough explanation of my rationale, and I'll just be quiet till the vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. And council members, please bear with me. I just want to say our council, our city council as a body, we are more effective and do better work when we, as we almost always do, keep a fair level of respect and understanding between the 9 of us, which I think we usually do a very, very good job of, better than some other elected bodies that have been mentioned earlier this evening. And of course, when we make comments and we debate and we raise issues, we never seek to place individual motivations or impugn individual opinions. That's why we're here, is to share those things. And we all come from a place of trying to do the best advocacy we can. And I know that all members understand that. And but it's always worth mentioning, especially on a topic like this, which is a tough one. I'd like to call on Councilmember Schmeckel, who's next in order, and then I'll go to Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say that generally speaking, I do prefer the map 1B. And while I think that several comments have addressed lots of my thoughts here this evening, one comment that's not been brought up is that when I look at map 2.1 or map 3, I don't see the balance between the residential side of things and our commercial districts. And while I recognize that our census maps are driven purely by where people reside, we have to oversee all aspects of their life here in Laramie and respect it. And I think that we're get a better balance amongst the 3 wards representing all of those districts. If we look at map 1B here, that does a little bit better job of dividing up our downtown commercial district evenly amongst the 3 wards. And I think that that's an important thing to note. It's not the only factor by any means, but I think it is something that needs to be considered.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. Councilmember Somerville, I've gone out of order, and I do need to recognize Councilmember Schuster. And Councilmember Schuster, I apologize. You know what it is? It's the little hand icon that I often use to keep track of, and I miss your hand, so I apologize. Speaking of trying to get along well and be respectful of each other, my apologies. Councilmember Schuster, you've got the floor.
You got to remember, I love to pick on people, so I'm going to pick on your memory span instead of that little icon, just to have fun with it. So, yes, we do this to town because people tell me I'm in the W Hill area. Just like people said, you're on West Side, you're in West Laramie. And yes, and Brian Harrington said it very well, and you said it very well, that West Laramie was an established community and then got annexed into the city. Because the city always had a rule, well, usually had a rule, because I was at a breakfast meeting Saturday, and somebody reminded me that they have the oldest dirt street in Laramie, and they are on First Street, just past the historical railroad depot, going south, and they have never, ever had payment, and it goes back 120 years on that street. So I teased him about that. So yeah, not being and it was a classmate that went to high school with me. So I really picked on him. We have always done everything we can for every corner of the community. When we have had really, really good supply of money from the state, Joe Hageman and I, and this would have been 16 years ago, they had an absorbent amount of money going to a downtown project, and we fought it because you had to have 75% majority when you passed our city budget. And that particular year, we took $10 million out of that project, and we paved one block off of Snowy Range Road on almost every intersection. And that was because two of us, neither one of us from that ward said they needed a lot worse than you did on a really exorbitant project that would have made something look very nice. But no, we said no on that. So there has been several council people from different wards that have worked exceptionally hard to make sure that all wards are tried to treat equal. And I've always felt I've tried to do that nobody's above anybody else. And like someone else said, probably a little over 60% of our budget is going to be to West Laramie, but there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure done. Several streets are ready to be paved now that people were so frustrated because we dug them up, we put new water lines, put new sewer lines, and then buried it. And they didn't like that. But we are working on it, and that got brought up in the meeting. When are you going to pave the roads? And I says, well, we're going to do a certain percentage every single year. And I said, hopefully we're done. I says, you're not going to like to hear this, but probably in 20 years we'll have the whole city equal. But I don't see it happening before then. I try to tell the truth the best I can anytime I talk about it. And any one of the three maps that gets the majority, I'm happy with it. I will be happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Comments that were worth the wait, in my opinion, even though I passed you over twice. Apologies again. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I do appreciate the comments and the discussion and the thought that's being put into this. This is not an easy process to do redistricting. And to be honest, I share some serious frustrations about where our census blocks are drawn. I know that several of the council members would agree with that because I think it limits us, unfortunately, in a way that maybe we wouldn't like to be limited in. But that being said, we have to deal with what we have. 2 points I want to make is one, I did talk with several residents in the West Side neighborhood for this reason, right? I want to make sure that they knew what was kind of going on, what the options were, and wanted to get their feedback. To be honest, nobody really had any strong feelings. When I talked to them about being divided along Clark Street or approximately in the middle or somewhere in there, I didn't receive any comments that were negative. They said, okay. In talking with a few people in West Laramie, the overriding principle is they just want to feel like they're part of the city. And that's not always an easy thing to do. The last point, Mayor, that I want to make is one of the other reasons that I like Map 1B is the geographical diversity. I think that's balanced better in all three wards. I've always felt that Ward 2 that's so tiny and it packs so many people into a tiny area, and then of course Ward 1, was always larger, even if you take off the airport chunk, which I know we have to include. That makes it look funny, right? But we have to include it. So that's one of the other reasons. I do want the council members to know that I've put a lot of thought into this and time and conversations with constituents, and that's how I've arrived at where I am at. So, Mayor, I'll leave my comments there and see if there's any others before I make my amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I was wondering if we could ask the clerk to share the screen to show the 1B map.
I think it's helpful. And City Clerk, probably just to save you some time, and I bet you, but yeah, just to try to have them as handy as possible. Since we're talking about 1B now, can we try to zoom in a little bit closer on that? We'll give the City Clerk just a moment.
Yeah.
All right. So was there a specific area that you wanted to draw attention to on the map, Councilmember O'Doherty, or did you just want to have it up and available?
I thought it would be nice to have it up in case the public wants to know what the heck we're talking about. Thank you.
You bet. It's conscientious. Appreciate it. Councilmember Schuster, I'll recognize you again.
This one here I'm going to talk about because our main things of growth have been basically north and south of Laramie, behind Wally World. I'm going to pick on them. I don't care. And also behind Indian Hills. There are several subdivisions that are going to jump into place when the Reynolds Sewer Project is going to be complete. And then we have a lot of people building up on the bluff. The other biggest one, since been on the former planning commission, was they are looking to, you can see some little jog outs, and I hate to use the term, but I'm going to bit northwest Laramie, where Councilor Somerville lives, and right behind her house, that whole field that's there has been plotted. Now, when and if they're ever going to build there, because I've watched this happen a couple times, where somebody looks at it and thinks about annexing it, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong, and they go, okay, I'm done, take it back off the map. But being on the planning commission, seeing the areas of when people are going to build, I saw a large subdivision off Indian Hills, a large subdivision behind Walmart, a large subdivision south of, I hate to use Councilman Somerville's house, but that one. And then I saw a fairly good lot, catty corner from Wyotech dorms. Those are the three biggest ones I've seen right now of people that want to build. And there's probably more, and I just haven't heard about them. But yeah, so I just wonder if in 10 years, and I'm sure in 10 years, nobody can predict the future. I'm sure in 10 years, they're going to mess this map up again, just because they can.
Other comments on the map in question or the other map that was approved last week? Council members, I'd like to ask you to consider that we go through proposed amendments now, take comments on those from the council members and the public, and then we'll, depending on how that outcome presents itself, then we'll go to public comment on the main motion as amended or not afterwards. Is that satisfactory to the council members? All right. Seems to me that we should see if we're going to change the map at all first before we talk about whatever it's going to be and take comment on it. If there aren't any objections, Councilmember Somerville, I think you have an amendment pending, so I'm going to go to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I do. At this time, I move to amend by substitution map proposal 1B, replacing map 2.1 as the ordinance reference for the ward boundaries.
Second.
Motion and a second from the Vice Mayor. Council, we've had some discussion already from ourselves. Do you want more at this time, or should we go to members of the public to see if there are strong feelings? I'm going to go to the members of the public without any objection. Public comment on the amendment. Seeing none, we'll close public comment on the amendment. We'll go to discussion amongst the council on the amendment. Discussion and questions. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I'm going to oppose this amendment because even though I like it personally from my ward, it makes it easier because it's similar to what I represent now. I oppose it because I think it's confusing to voters to have, we would need at least 9 precincts within the city limits. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Other comments? Other comments? Questions about this? Council, if you allow it, I'd like to make one more comment along the lines of future growth patterns. As the council member a few minutes ago said, in 10 years, there are some things we can anticipate, and there's a heck of a lot more that we really just don't know how things are going to go. We know where people might be considering doing some building and how those patterns might follow in the community. One of the areas that I was surprised Councilmember Schuster didn't mention, because I know it's one that he's been watching, is the future Bill Nye area and some of the neighborhoods along some. I can look out my window in my neighborhood and see where new housing has just come up in the last couple of years and where more is probably planned. And it's all over the place. And there are different things in different sections of this map or any other map that we might adopt that are going to drive some of those things. And that's hard. That's one of the things that makes this very difficult, is because we could miss the mark on where the growth may be most intense, because it's really not a decision that we're going to make. We may have some impact on it. We might have a role in some of the code and some of the zoning and things of that nature, but where people decide to invest and where the development dollars go to build new neighborhoods and new sections of the city and new commercial developments are not in our hands, at least not to a large extent. So that's another difficulty here. And I share the council member's assessment that in 10 years, this map has at least equal chances of not making sense as it does still following patterns. And I think that would apply to the other 2 maps introduced, or at least proposed as well. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that Councilman O'Doherty brings up a good point that maybe just deserves a comment in terms of explaining these maps to the public. Again, I would express my frustration with where the census blocks lay and how we have to do this. I wish we could make this easier, right? With simple, clean lines, but we really can't do that with any of the maps, including 1B. I mean, we're gonna have to do the same thing we've done for the last 10 years, which is show somebody where they're at using a map and make those resources as available as we can. I do share her frustration about trying to convey all of this to the public. It seems to be an education point we've struggled with, or at least I have since I've been on council, is folks not knowing actually what ward they're in all the time. So I just thought I'd mention that. I think that those are worthy points of discussion. I wish that we could do more about it. And the ballot styles, again, we're going to have wards with multiple ballot styles as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember O'Doherty.
The map maker wants to explain a couple other things about the map. The red lines are the House district boundaries, and in my interpretation this is what caused some members to feel like it's like we're ignoring the west side of town. So those boundaries are the reason that we have to have so many wards within the city of Laramie with this map. So just so the public knows that I'm pointing to it like anybody else can see where I'm pointing. but the area to the left is what will become House District 46, and also the area to the south. And then the area in the center that has the top of the pickup truck, and yeah, that's
the green
that will be
section.
House District 45. And then the southeast corner of that polygon will become House District 13, and then above that is House District 14 that goes up into the county. So House Districts 45 and 13 are wholly within the city limits, and 14 and 46 are shared city and outside the city limits. And I also wanted to point out that we talked about there's going to be more dense housing built near Wyotech, so that population goes up in a smaller area. So population is going up everywhere. The census was taken before all those new developments or the new townhouses on Reynolds, and before a lot of the new developments on Bill Nye, and before the apartments off of Snowy Range Road. So, you know, and I don't want to point out that all of the proposals keep the present dorm location and the future UW dorm location in the same ward, so that if that does change within the next 5 years, but we're not going to get way out of balance, because just the one census block that has the dorms is 1,600 people. So wherever that block moves, things change drastically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty, and that speaks to that point that a couple of us have made about the growth patterns certainly affect every area, regardless of which map we're looking at. Council members, I want to quickly point out that Councilmember O'Doherty simply was nice enough to lend her expertise in using these systems for maps. We didn't say, Councilmember O'Doherty, you're in charge of all maps. And I think, and the only reason I bring this up is kind of to the point raised by the discussion with Councilmember Harrington and I earlier. It's just important to be clear about things. And if you needed some evidence to that effect, members of the public or members of the council, as Councilmember O'Doherty has drawn iterations of maps that she does not support, working with other council members for different configurations. And simply, she had an expertise that she could lend. And I know that we probably feel comfortable with that, but I think a public discussion of that is merited as well. So hopefully that's satisfactory for everybody. And thank you. And let me add my voice to the comments about being frustrated with the somewhat, in my layman's opinion, incomprehensible census block designations and census tract designations, because they don't seem to comport. And Councilmember O'Doherty, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't really comport with city boundaries in any way, shape, or form, which I think is an error. But as far as I know, they don't track at all. Can you answer that question for me, Councilmember?
The blocks will, but it's the other things are drawn by an algorithm, I guess every 9 or 10 years before the census. And so we have some really strangely shaped census blocks that force things where you would like to have a nice line, you have to do something funny. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer to that question. Council members, pretty good, robust discussion about this. Lots of pretty strong points raised around the issue. Are we prepared for Councilor Somerville to introduce an amendment and then move forward? Or she's introduced an amendment. Are we prepared to go to a vote? Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Thank you. Sorry for the error. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on the amendment?
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
No.
Harrington.
No.
O'Doherty.
No.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Sorry, yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 5 yeses and 4 noes, Your Honor.
That motion carries. That amendment has been adopted. We're back on the main motion, council members. Discussion on the main motion as amended. Go to public for public comment on the motion as amended. Yes, recognize Judy Snoke. I would say Miss Snoke, but she always makes fun of me, so Judy Snoke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't mind if you make fun of me. All's fair.
Lucky for me.
Yeah, I know, lucky for me. Could we have a repeat of what that amendment now states? I just need to get it clear in my head, please. Thank you.
Sure. To make it as short as I can, what the amendment has done is adopted the 1B map, which I think the city clerk can probably put on the screen for us again. So So the council has voted to adopt this map for the redistricting of the city council wards at this time on second reading.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you. Councilor O'Doherty.
Mr. Weaver, I tried to share the PowerPoint that has those three proposals with the League of Women Voters, so I hope Judy's got a copy of that. So it's in there. It's one of the maps in that PowerPoint.
Thank you. All right. Judy, did you have another question for us?
No, I don't. Okay.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking some time to join us at the meeting.
Over my hand. There you go.
All right. Seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment. Back to the main motion. All right, seeing no further comment, I'll make one brief one, which is just, I want to recognize something that over my time and experience with the city council, I think the city council and all city council members have an interesting job, which is that because we've adopted a ward system of 3 wards with 3 members each, we are responsible for balancing two things, which is, one, do you pay attention to your specific ward needs, desires, characteristics, policy preferences, as much as you pay attention to just a sort of general overview job as a member of the Laramie City Council? There aren't too many issues where those things are separate, and I've always thought about that. And one conclusion that I've reached is that for the most part, the job is one as a city council member for the whole of Laramie, and the reason we have 3 wards with 3 members each is so people have 3 people that they can go to for concerns, whatever they might be. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they're concerns about the entire city, and then every now and then you'll get one about your ward in general. And all of the people that I've served with in two terms have done a good job of doing both of those things when and where they needed to, and have paid attention to direct ward concerns when it was called for, and spent a lot of their time and energy trying to make good decisions for the city of Laramie as a whole now and into the future. And I would anticipate, regardless of whatever map we end up adopting on third reading, that will continue to be the case. So I just think that's worth saying. Why don't we go to a vote on the map as amended, council members, if there isn't any objection? Okay. City Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Humby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
No.
Harrington.
No.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 7 yeses and 2 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Thank you, council members, for the discussion and worthy debate on that item. The motion carries. We're on item number 17. Is everybody wanting to keep on moving forward? Do you need a break or you want to keep going? Oh, City Clerk.
Mayor, I was just wondering if you could, if we could just let the public know that we are planning third reading on March 22nd. We are attempting to try to get this finished up so the county clerk has appropriate notice times for the public notice she sends out to the public for voting and things to that nature, her precincts and everything. So I just wanted to make note that it will be March 22nd at 6 o'clock, and we'll publish notices accordingly.
Thank you, City Clerk. Appreciate that very much. My understanding is that the City Clerk's office is required to have their precincts for these offices across Albany County and the City of Laramie prepared by May 3rd or May 4th. Is that correct, City Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. The county clerk is required to do some publications a couple weeks prior to the county commissioners adopting a resolution, adopting precincts. And so we're attempting to get all of our timelines lined up to allow them enough time to get publications, as well as all the mailed information that they send to our voters out in a timely manner.
Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk. And I guess, you know, there's more to it than just these ward boundaries for members of the public and for the press. There's still a lot of other things in motion, not the least of which being we're unsure of the final fate of the current map of legislative districts that, as far as we know, remains as yet unsigned by the governor. Council members, do you want to break or do you want to just keep going? It's 10 after 8. Want me to just keep going? Nods all around. Okay, appreciate it. That's going to get us to item number 17. Before I go, Council Member Somerville, you had raised your hand a minute ago. Are you?
Mayor, I was just trying to get your attention for the city clerk.
You bet. Thanks. City Clerk, I'm sorry that I missed you for a second there. Council Member Cumby, it's item number 17, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We've lost your audio, Councilor Cumby.
All right, I'm back.
There you go. We've lost your audio again, Councilmember Cumby. I think you might be inadvertently hitting the space bar or something there.
Okay. It was going out when I clicked into the document that I'm reading.
Sure.
I move to approve original ordinance number 2043, amending table 15.10-1, table of allowed uses, and chapter 15.10.020.d.5, additional standards for specific accessory uses and structures of Laramie Municipal Code as recommended by the Planning Commission on first reading in accordance with findings of fact and conclusions of law. Second.
Motion and a second from Vice Mayor Pierce. And we've got our planner. Philip, you are not new, but you're still newish. And I still am reluctant to mangle your last name. So I apologize, but we've got our planner with us to help us with background. And thanks for being here. And please remind me how to say your last name so I don't feel stupid this way again. I'd like to feel stupid in a different way next time.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, members of council, it's just a silent H in there. So if you take the H out, it's just Gabatuller.
Thank you so much.
Yes. But yeah, the text amendment to the ordinance that you have in front of you this evening is to make family child care centers and type 2 child care homes permitted uses in all residential zoning districts. Currently, if someone wants to start a child care center with 15 or less children in their home, they're in a residential district, then they have to go through our conditional use permit, which takes time and a lot of staff time, basically, as well as it costs them the application fee as well. So that's kind of the impetus of why we're looking into this, is because we went back into just basically looking at the history of child care centers in Laramie, and we saw that in the last 10 years, there's been 46 child care centers of this type that we're asking to be permitted, which is basically those that have 15 or fewer children. All of them were approved. None of them were extremely contentious. I mean, there were 7 that warranted unsupported comments, but even those 7 were approved ultimately and the issues were resolved. So in the staff report that I attached, it gives you the history basically of those. It gives the definition of the two types of childcare homes basically that we're looking to permit. There is still the daycare center proper, which is 16 or more children, which all of them will still need to go through the conditional use permit process. I would like to note that in addition to the table of permitted uses, changing that to make them all permitted uses in the residential districts, we're also proposing to add these two uses to the same chapter in code that references home occupations. So think if you currently are already allowed to run a business out of your home, such as a beauty parlor, a real estate office, basically. There's a list of uses that are currently permitted as long as they meet a certain criteria, conditions, which are outlined in this ordinance amendment as well. And again, because we are just part of the puzzle. If you want to put a child care center in your home, you still need to be licensed by Wyoming Department of Family Services, which I also attached their checklist of all the items that they check, which includes a fire inspection as well. Our fire marshal, Dennis Johnson, he goes into all of these homes before they are licensed by WDFS. So there is still, a high standard for these, but it takes out the involvement of the planning office and all the other internal departments that review every one of these CUPs that come through. So without further ado, I think that gives a good overview. And Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
I appreciate that background, Mr. Capitular. Appreciate it very much. So we've got some hands coming up. So I am not sure who was first between the Vice Mayor and Council Member O'Doherty. Why don't you raise your actual hand if you're really burning to go first, Council Member? Oh, all right. Council Member. Okay, Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, my comment was basically a summary of what occurred during Planning Commission was that they passed this unanimously. If I'm recalling correctly, Philip, I think there might have been a couple folks absent, but I believe it was 5-0 in approval of this. So just wanted to throw it in there before we got into the discussion.
I really appreciate that, Vice Mayor. And I did intend on asking you a little bit as our liaison about that planning commission meeting, but thank you. Councilmember O'Doherty, over to you.
I just, daycare is sorely needed. And so my kids were in the family daycare and it was wonderful. And I just want to make sure people have that opportunity. And since there's so many checks on home daycare by the state and the fire department, I feel good about this. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Council Member Somerville.
Thanks, Mayor. I ditto to what has been said so far, and just add, childcare is hard to come by right now. The pandemic has hit childcare incredibly hard. It has made it very, very difficult for working parents to find affordable or, frankly, even childcare at all. And that continues to be a struggle. So by removing this barrier of having them do a conditional use application, I think that adds a small step to helping towards that problem. So again, I think the safety checks are all there, and I think this is a great idea.
Other comments or questions? Yes, my understanding is that it's been hard yet, and it certainly was just made worse by everything we've all had to go through over the last couple of years. And it's in demand, and as soon as a place is available that people build up a relationship with, they fill up quickly, and then they can't take any more people, and the demand doesn't go away. I know a couple of people that worked in the childcare sector here in Laramie, and they're always full, always people wanting to get in. So I think it's good to try to be able to facilitate this. And I do appreciate the planner going through the fact that it's not just the planning office that says, oh, okay, great, yeah, there's nothing wrong with your neighborhood. There's certainly a whole regulatory process where the Department of Family Services sends someone out to certify these things. And of course, our fire department makes sure that they're not dangerous areas. So I think that's worth talking about too. All right, why don't we see if there's public comment, if there's anything else from council. Doesn't appear to be any public comment on the item. I would add one more little 2 cents, which is that we approved a couple of these when I was on the Planning Commission a decade ago now. There were a few that came through, and one of the only complaints that we ever heard about these were worries and concerns about traffic and parking. And I think generally what's happened is that the neighbors have found that those concerns aren't as bad as they might have anticipated. And I don't think we've ever had a lot of follow-up on those home-based care centers after they've been put in place. I don't know, Philip, could you add a little bit more on top of that? That seems to be the pattern of concern in neighborhoods where these go in, is traffic and parking. But I don't know that we ever have a lot of follow-up after those concerns are expressed when a daycare starts operating. It seems like it goes okay. I don't know if you can add to that.
Yeah, and speaking with Derek, who certainly knows the history of these a lot better than I do in this locality, is that most of the time when you introduce what's conceived as or perceived as a business in a single family or any residential district, then there is just a general outcry because people are only used to neighbors just being neighbors and not being a business, right? So I mean, there are some those are certainly valid concerns, but we like to mention that there's nothing keeping anyone here from having a get-together every morning at 6 a.m. and inviting all your friends over. As long as nobody's making noise and creating a nuisance in the neighborhood, that's totally fine. But I will also mention that there's 2 conditions that would be attached to this if it were to be passed. One of them requires 2 paved off-street parking spaces, one for staff and one for pickup and drop off. And then there's also the condition that child care homes shall not create traffic or parking congestion. So this is, if a neighbor were to have a concern with traffic or parking, then they could, they would call the city just like they would with any other concern about a nuisance, and we would have this to call that property in question, and we could, use this as ultimately a way to ask them to cease operation if it ever got that far. However, as you mentioned, it's never been the case, and to my understanding and to Derek's, there's never been a daycare shut down for creating a parking issue or a traffic congestion issue.
I really appreciate you covering that. I think that was, council, I do think those little points there about those concerns were worth covering. If it got to be a problem, it probably could be addressed, and it's not something we're just saying, oh, well, who cares about people's concerns about their neighborhoods? No, certainly not. But we don't have a pattern of that having been the case. Seemed like it would be worth us covering just now. Why don't we see if there's public comment? Unless I did that already, I'm sorry, memory fails me. we'll see if there's public comment on this code change to allow child care centers. Doesn't look like it, folks. Anything else from the council on this one? All right, City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes,
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
that motion carries. Thank you, council members. Thank you, City Clerk. All right, so that's going to take us to item number 18. This is Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve original ordinance number 2044, amending sections of Title 15.10, 15.12, and 15.14 of the Laramie Municipal Code as recommended by the Planning Commission on first reading in accordance with findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Second.
It's a motion and a second from Councilmember Harrington. Mr. Gabatula.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, members of council. We have had, with this council, we've had a work session, and we've had a work session with Planning Commission as well. So I won't spend a lot of time on the background of this effort, but I will spend time on the proposed changes, which start on page 4 of the staff report that you have, which actually get into the nuts and bolts of what this text amendment is all about. So I'll go through these proposed changes on the single-family zoning districts, and in an effort to increase affordability in the city of Laramie, I'll go through these proposed changes, and then I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, we have an update to the dimensional standards, which if you remember, this was done for the multifamily zoning districts back towards the end of last year. The same thing is being proposed now, which basically gives more flexibility to the potential developer on how and to develop land, basically. So first of all, if you want to scroll down a little bit, to those. First, we'll go over the minimum lot width. Currently, you can see the crossed out numbers are what's current. In the rural residential district, lot width is 75. In the limited residential district, it's 60. In the R1, it's 55. We're proposing to decrease that to 30 feet across the board, which again increases the flexibility and creates the ability for smaller lots, which would hopefully be a piece in the puzzle in increasing affordability. Secondly, we have the minimum lot area, which, as you can see again, you can see those changes there. 8,000 square feet is what we're proposing for rural residential, 5,000 square feet for limited residential, and 4,000 square feet for R1. And then setback requirements. We are decreasing rural residential to 10 feet front, 5 foot side and rear. In the limited residential, same thing, 10 foot front, 5 foot rear is the only one that's changing there. And in R1, we're changing it to 10 feet as well. And just if we could scroll back up, I'd like to just go over quickly that example, which kind of shows a final plat that was actually on the consent agenda this evening. That's the same one on the Coughlin Pole Mountain 3rd edition. And you can see here that 15 lots were developed on this approximately 200,000 square foot piece of land. Certainly, I think between 7 and 10% of that is generally taken up by street right-of-way. So with what's left, you can see what building to current minimum lot size and the proposed minimum lot size in that district, which is R1, would allow you to build. So this is certainly a overarching. It's kind of a a broad look at this, but what we should take away from this is that the cost of infrastructure generally is going to stay the same no matter how many lots you build, right? But the cost that the basically from plan investment fees and costs that the builder or the resident takes up, the city stands to win in this example with building smaller lots and promoting that. The developer, as you can see, also wins by building smaller lots, which isn't always intuitive, but we just wanted to pull this example of something that's current in all of our minds of this final plat that was just passed tonight, and kind of give a sense of, yes, the size of these lots conform to all the other lots in the neighborhood, and this developer certainly had a reason to do that. But for future development, you can kind of see the difference that can be done on a development of this size. But certainly think about larger size, such as Turner Tract or something like that, where these numbers would increase even more and allow for more buildable lots and be an incentive to the developer as well. So I'd like to scroll down to item number 2 now, which has to do with the garage requirement that we currently have. We are certainly not proposing to eliminate the garage and not allow for garages. That's not our intent here. Again, it's just to eliminate the garage requirement, to allow the ability of developer to basically build more house and less garage, or no garages at all, which hopefully that savings would go towards the end consumer. Item number 3. This is when we start getting into the accessory dwelling unit discussion. And item number 3, it just addresses the definition, because there is currently a definition in our code, but it's being refined here as a living quarters within a single family zone property, and it lists the 3 types that can be attached or detached from the principal structure. And I think it's important here to mention again that an accessory dwelling unit isn't just referring to a detached, basically a detached building in your backyard that all of a sudden your mother-in-law is living in. This could certainly be a attached building to the principal structure on your property as well. It can also be in your principal structure. It can be in your attic. It could be in a converted garage. It can be in the basement. There are certain conditions you'll see later that outlines the size of those, but it gives flexibility as to what an accessory dwelling unit means. So item number 4, this begins the discussion of making this making accessory dwelling units legitimate units to be rented that are separate completely from the house, that are this item number 4 speaks to them having separate metering. We know this is going to cost the property owner money to implement this, but that's kind of our idea, is not wanting to just see a lot of converted garages that really are less than habitable, so to speak. We want to have serious thought and going towards these accessory dwelling units, and this is just one of the conditions that it would have to meet, separate metering. Item number 5, that's just correcting an error in our code currently. That's not a major change. Item number 6, this gets into the conditions that have to be met by the accessory dwelling units. I'll go through these. So number 1, accessory dwelling unit may be attached or detached from the principal structure on the property. I already went over that about the different forms an accessory dwelling unit can take. Of course, item number 2, all applicable lot and principal building type standards for the district shall apply. So if it is detached in your backyard, you'll still have to meet those setback requirements. Number 3, only one accessory dwelling unit is permitted per detached 1-unit dwelling on a lot. That's pretty self-explanatory. 4, accessory dwelling units must have a separate access from the principal structure. That's addressing the fact that we're trying to deter just houses from being cut up, and we will want to have a separate entrance. Item number 5, accessory dwelling units must have separate utility access from the principal structure. That speaks to that metering, that separate metering we went over. Item number 6, the building footprint of the accessory dwelling unit may be up to 40% of the building footprint of the principal dwelling unit, or 600 square feet, whichever amount is less. So basically, you'll never have a building footprint of a detached ADU, which is over 600 square feet. And that's the footprint. The next item speaks to the actual square footage of the structure, so keep that in mind. So item number 7, the maximum square footage of an accessory dwelling unit can be no more than 1,200 square feet and have a minimum square footage of 220 square feet. Item number 8, unit size limitations shall apply to ADUs within the principal structures. So that is basically speaking to attached ADUs. It still cannot be over 1,200 square feet if it's inside of a principal structure. And then lastly, the accessory dwelling unit may not exceed the height of the principal structure. So we went through this and presented to Planning Commission at their February 28th meeting. It was unanimously passed 5-0 with 2 absent. And we did not receive any comment after advertising it in the Laramie Boomerang for the 2-week period that's required. Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And I appreciate you running through kind of step by step. Councilmember O'Doherty, you're first.
I heard from a friend recently who was upset about somebody renting their house because she said that that's not allowed. And I said, I don't think you can rent your house out. And she said, oh no, we have covenants. So I'm wondering about the intersection of this with covenants. But then I'm going to ask for an amendment on second reading about the separate metering. I have a very energy efficient house. So my base charge for my electricity and gas is way more than my electric use or gas use. So forcing somebody to have a separate meter, if they have energy efficient buildings, it's penalizing efficiency. And I would like to talk about that with an amendment next time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty, and that's why we like to do second reading amendments. Maybe the staff can contact and communicate with Councilmember O'Doherty with some thoughts about how that amendment might come forward. Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mayor. I had a similar thought as Councilor Doherty with the separate metering. To me, that makes sense in regards to an entirely new build or a sort of separate structure. But if we're talking about a garage conversion or a home conversion, something of that sort, I'm not sure that makes as much sense, or may just present an unnecessary hurdle, as the ADU will have to comply with all building code anyway, which may present a hurdle for some folks already. And then I would just add, Mr. Mayor, that the housing action team met surrounding this as well, and there was there wasn't a huge attendance, but those members there were favorable to these changes as well. There was one note, and Philip was pretty cautious to make sure that he said we weren't removing garages as an option in R1, just the requirement to have them, because there was sort of the thought like everybody in an R1 wants a garage. But in the case that they don't, they would, under these changes, be allowed not to. So I think these are pretty great changes. Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Doherty, could you revisit your question about covenants? I mean, it's possible that the city attorney might be able to help us out with that now.
Well, I don't really quite understand how covenants work. I guess it's filed with the clerk and it's a contractual thing among the homeowners in that area. So if the covenant says you can't have these things, it's not really our problem as a city, as I understand it. It's among the neighbors. They have to duke it out. Is that what happens with covenants? If the covenants say you can't subdivide?
I think you're right about that, but if the city attorney is available, he might be able to give us the real deal answer on that. I think that covenants, they have a lot of leeway, or they have some leeway at least about what they can put in there, and that they may be able to put in provisions that would supersede some of these kinds of zoning and planning things. City attorney, thank you. Can you help us?
I'm here, actually.
Yep.
The covenants will control, and that'll be between the people who are parties to the covenants.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, the answer, Councilor Doherty, is you're correct. Now, the people who have the right to enforce those covenants can decide what they do or how they want to sort it out.
Thank you, city attorney. Appreciate it. And yes, we knew you were here. Why you wouldn't just sit there with the name on the screen unless you were trying to get an effective sleep aid. I've got Councilmember Harrington, and then I think Vice Mayor Pierce. Councilmember Harrington. Wait, are you going for a second time, Councilmember Harrington?
Mr. Mayor, I just didn't take my hand down.
No problem. Yeah, that's how it goes. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think to remind council, the market, our housing market is really a driving force in this discussion related to garages and builds and the cost of making this all work. So I'd like to throw that out there as just a reminder. And the second thing related to the garages, which the Planning Commission really didn't talk about, was a garage could be added, right? So say, for example, you're in a financial situation, as my parents were a number of years ago, where they were able to build a house and then, 5 years later, 3 years later, whatever it was, they were then able to build the garage, right? So I think that gives our homeowners that opportunity to assess or reassess their finances as time goes by. So I'd like to have council kind of keep that in mind as well.
Thank you for that comment. Other comments or questions on this? Can I make a quick one, council, this is just another code change that the council and our staff and our city management have brought forward as part of our sort of multi-pronged and ongoing effort with housing and affordability, and as that relates to our economic development and housing needs generally. This is another piece following some further policy decisions made by the council a couple of months ago. And I think it's just worth noting that this is fitting into that larger umbrella of those topics and concerns. Are we ready to go for public comment on the topic, on the question? Okay, great. Thanks, Council. Thanks for hanging in there with us, everybody. And I think we had a request for an early, previously arranged speaking opportunity for Mr. Glass. Mr. Glass is here, and I understand that he had something that he wanted to be shared with us, which he submitted to the clerk's office ahead of time. So I think the city clerk can get that image up for us. And Mr. Glass, you've got the floor, and if you want to wait till your image is up, or your slide is up, go ahead, or if you're ready to go while the city clerk's pulling that up, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I'll go ahead and hope that the image comes up. Oh, there it is. Okay. Well, I think we can all agree, or at least I hope that we can, that council should engage in evidence-based governance. It shouldn't succumb to fads or unproven theories, but should do things that have proven the work. Now, what you see here is a graph that was published by Nobel laureate economist Paul Krugman, who writes for the New York Times, and by the way, has a very liberal political bent. He argued in a recent column against the downzoning of neighborhoods in an attempt to make housing more affordable. He showed this graph, which demonstrates housing trends in areas with and without restrictive zoning and their effect on prices. He noted that in the housing bubble of 2006, on the left side of the graph, which was caused by subprime mortgages, there was a great increase in prices in areas with restrictive zoning in 2006, and that was because the bubble there was due to house flippers who were investing in these houses and thought that the limited supply in those areas made them good investments. But as the graph shows, the current housing bubble on the right is different. It's the result of demand by would-be residents who actually want to live in the houses, and it's affecting all housing equally, regardless of the zoning. Thus, what Krugman concludes that that downzoning residential neighborhoods would not do anything to make housing affordable for anybody during the current bubble. Now, the second graph I sent to the city clerk shows trends in building, and it's the dark blue one. It's the other file that I sent. This one shows that there have never been more homes under construction in the United States, the whole history of the United States, since the time when our veterans came home from the Vietnam War in the 1970s. And so we can see that the real source of the current bubble is demand. It's booming and driving up prices of materials and of labor and of everything, all of the inputs to housing. Now, we can't fix this by downgrading zoning requirements and harming the quality of our neighborhoods. It's just going to be that way, and the bubble is sure to eventually burst, but we don't have any control over that. Now, the residents of West Laramie beyond the 132-30 split, and also Cottonwood Estates, Richards Park, Alta Vista, Indian Hills, and Corthell Hills, are not going to appreciate a sudden change to the zoning. And I wouldn't blame them if they were up in arms about the change if they know about it. If we want Laramie to be a desirable place to live, we have to preserve the residential quality of our city, and this means not pulling the rug out from under homeowners by destroying the character of their neighborhoods. We don't want to eliminate the requirements for garages because that would lead to junk in yards, vehicles on lawns and along streets. And it wouldn't save much money either, because a garage, if you think about it, is the cheapest part of a house to build. It has lower requirements for finishing, it has lower requirements for insulations, so it really doesn't help much in terms of affordability. Now, if you want to allow some ADUs, fine. Draft an ordinance that does just that. Maybe cut setbacks a little bit, but don't cut lot sizes and absolutely don't eliminate garages, because that will change the character of neighborhoods. Now, as I said to the Planning Commission, and contrary to what staff said, I did comment to the Planning Commission about this. The downzoning of neighborhoods is a fad that started on the West Coast, and it is a bad idea that doesn't fit Laramie and is completely unproven to work anywhere. There's not a single shred of evidence that it would do any good except to a few developers' already fat wallets. And there is evidence that it could do some harm. So I'd like to ask you to seriously consider before passing this. I really think that you should either replace this with an ordinance that simply does some things such as allow ADUs, or drop it completely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time to make your comments. City Clerk, thank you for helping Mr. Glass with this informational slides. Do we have any other public comment on this from anyone else? Yes, I'm going to recognize Mr. Cisneros. Mike Cisneros, go ahead. You've got the floor.
Hello, can you city council members hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to speak. I just want to thank you guys for taking a look at this and recognizing it. There is a drastic need for affordable housing in Laramie. Housing costs have gone up drastically in the last 2 years. A typical 1,700 to 2,000 square foot house could be built for $400,000 2.5 to 3 years ago. That same house is costing about $525 to $550 to be able to put it all together. Wood cost, plywood, we've seen a 4 times increase. We were paying $25 a sheet for certain products that, we're still paying $90 a sheet for today. That's just happened in the last year, since last May, that those costs have gone up. They did go up a little higher and they've come down slightly, but I don't foresee that changing. And I think that we need to be able to recognize this as a community. There is nothing out there for sale. Hop on Zillow to look at the MLS. There's absolutely nothing out there for sale. And the ones that are, and when I say nothing, I'm talking there's 2 or 3 houses on the market. But the ones that are for sale are quite pricey for, not a lot of home. There's a lot of people that are wanting to live here that move away after they've come to take a job that they can't even find affordable housing to live in. We've got a lot of young professionals. We've got a lot of first-time home buyers. Some of these things with the smaller lots will allow for builders to be able to get into a market price point that will assist them in getting in. Unfortunately, we can't talk low numbers like we could have 2-3 years ago because the cost of materials have drastically increased, and it's everything. We are on a 16 to 30 week wait on windows. Try building a house and putting it together when you have to order your windows in a far greater time before you can even apply for your building permits. Those are the types of things that we're being putting in a situation to deal with. The fact of the matter is we need to be able to provide some affordable housing. And I understand that this is probably not right for every neighborhood. And I recognize that you guys have taken a look at this and from the perspective of, it's not being done in the R1 communities and things of that nature, which is great. We do need to be able to have some separation there with some of the homes that people want to be able to maintain their values. But there's a lot of small developments that can happen. There's a lot of small lots. There's lots in West Laramie. There's lots on the west side of town that previously were too small to build on. These types of things will allow for the building to be able to happen in these particular locations, which allows for us to put homes together that will be affordable for folks. And I just want to say thanks for taking a look at this. I think it's something that is desperately needed in our community, and I appreciate all of you folks.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Mr. Cisneros and other members of the public that have hung in there with us for so long this evening to get around to this agenda item to make comments. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we thank you for giving up so much of your time on a Tuesday night to give us those comments. It's important for us, so we thank you again. I have Council Member O'Doherty. Well, let me see one last call for public comment, council members. Let me just check. I don't think we have anyone else waiting in the wings, but I want to make sure. Doesn't look like it. So Council Member O'Doherty and then Council Member Schmeckel. Council Member O'Doherty.
I just want to remind people that developers build what they can sell, and if there's a market If there isn't a market for the small homes, they're not going to develop many of them. But we want to be able to give them an option. If you have a development, you can have a mix of sizes. I want to give them an option, is what I'm saying. And also, we have an aging population. People my age, I've heard from Councilor Schuster that his house is bigger than he might need right now, and it gives people an option to have an apartment and have younger people living in their too big baby boomer house. and also, I just think it's more important to house humans than cars. And so I think getting rid of the garage requirement, but people are going to want garages when they're buying a new house, and they're just going to tack it into their mortgage. But I want them to have an option. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Doherty. I'm going to go Councilmember Schmeckel, and I've got the Councilmember you next, Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to pile on here and say that I think that what drives the developers is profits as well as certainty that they're going to get those profits. And I think that having these changes in here are probably a pretty good idea. I also think that this R1 housing is going to be geared more towards the young workers that this community is desperately trying to attract and retain once we have them here and college educated. I know of a local company with strong roots here that passed up an opportunity to do some significant growth here because there's no housing. When I was checking earlier during the meeting on the Realtor app, I noticed that there are 14 houses for sale, 15 if you count the one that's duplicated. None of them are less than $305,000, and only 3 of the 14 are less than $450,000. This is deeply concerning. And while I think that there are concerns, I don't think we have to worry about having to rebuild entire neighborhoods because we're rezoning this. I think everyone gets to keep their house the way that it is. I think that this is about new housing, and we desperately need it. There was a report out of Jackson yesterday that says that they are 5,000 units behind. I feel that Laramie is very fortunate that we're I believe it's 1,500 units behind where we need to be. I think we're fortunate that we have an opportunity to fix that now. I think this is part of that equation.
Thank you. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Support all the comments that have been made, so I'll keep mine very brief. I hope the council will consider moving this forward and looking at some second reading amendments. I think that I've heard some good discussion on those already, but I think this is, again, another tool in the toolbox, and the future where even a young professional couple, in their early 30s that wants to buy a house, they may need to have an ADU to bring in income to offset that $550,000 or $650,000 mortgage for the house that they want to buy. I think that's certainly the direction I feel like we're moving in. And so I appreciate the discussion, and I certainly support this ordinance and want to give our developers and residents more options.
Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. Other questions? I have a question for the planner, Mr. Gabatuller. As I have followed this issue and our discussion tonight, I have a question. What we're doing here, it seems, is we're adding some modifications to existing zoning. We're not eliminating any particular zoning with this policy decision tonight. This isn't an elimination or a change in zoning. This is adding to what we permit within certain kinds of zoning. Is that a reasonable assessment of this measure?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, everything really is only adding to. We're not restricting it. I feel like we're broadening it to allow greater flexibility in these zoning districts. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gabatuller. Let me ask you a follow-up question. Are you familiar with this term down zoning and what that refers to, and how that might contrast with what we might be looking at doing tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. When we if you remember, we gave the presentation that we did during the work session kind of had the green, yellow, and red kind of options, and we had the down zoning, which is basically defined as getting rid of a zoning district. Essentially, what's being referred to as down zoning is getting rid of R1 and essentially making it multifamily. So looking at zoning as a hierarchical system, and like the least dense to the most dense, and you're down zoning, you're getting rid of a zoning classification. And that's not what we're proposing here. That's kind of what's being proposed in cities and some smaller, bigger cities, in California have been doing this. As you've seen in the news, Minneapolis has done this, but also some smaller cities in Washington have taken this on, where the ability to build the traditional single family home is not there anymore.
But that's not
No, that's not what we didn't recommend that as an avenue, because we don't feel like we're at that point yet. We have a lot of developable area. Council member Schmeckel pointed out that a lot of these changes we also believe is going to be playing out in new development rather than in existing neighborhoods. It's just going to be, you haven't seen a whole lot of raising of houses and building new multifamily in areas where that is permitted. Now, you just don't see that because there is a lot of developable space still available in the city, and we're not to the point yet to make that recommendation to council and the planning commission of that down zoning route.
Indeed, if we ever get there at all. Council members, will you bear with me for one more question for Mr. Gavatuller? My question is, and I'm not sure if you'll have this information at the ready, but I'd like to get it at some point. You answered a couple of my questions without me having to ask. I appreciate that. But my question right now is, of land available, undeveloped land that is zoned, available for development in Laramie right now, do you happen to have a breakdown of the percentage of between R1 and R2 of zoned but undeveloped land that is available for development in the community? And if you don't, can you get that for us?
Yeah, we can certainly. We've done some GIS analysis in earlier presentations on the total amount, but as far as what's developable, that'll be the next level, and we can certainly get you those numbers. Yeah,
I'd appreciate that very much. Thank you for those, Council. Thanks for letting me ask a few questions there on the tail end. Anything else? Questions or comments? All right. 9:02 p.m. City Clerk, can we call vote?
Humby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schmeckel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 nos, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Council, that motion carries. And that gets us now to item number 19, public comments on non-agenda items. Non-agenda items. Seeing none, we'll close public comment on non-agenda items. Go to the next item on our agenda, which we addressed in pre-meeting some, which is the upcoming meetings. Are there any council members that have discussion about future work session topics, suggestions, or the upcoming meetings? All right, upcoming meetings will be, of course, posted in the City Council's agenda center for anybody that's interested. Yes, Councilmember O'Doherty?
I'm wondering about removing under the work session topics. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to go there.
Okay, maybe next time. Any other work session topic suggestions or anything about the upcoming meetings? Seeing none, I'm going to take it to Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. I move that the city council adjourn to executive session regarding land negotiations and litigations, Wyoming State Statute 16-4-405, small letter A, Roman numeral 3, and Wyoming State Statute 16-4-405A, Roman numeral 7. Or 8. 7. Sorry. Can't read my own handwriting.
Second.
The second motion from Councilmember Schuster and a second from Councilmember Somerville. And all those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll adjourn to executive session. We'll see you there in about 5 minutes or less.